Alleluia. Om Mani Padme Om. Allah Satnam.
Welcome. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Pamela Watson. She's a grief and loss counsellor. And last week we were speaking about the whole birthing process, and this week we'll talk about grief and loss. As a grief and loss counsellor, when we were talking earlier, you said you'd found this quotation which sort of encapsulates the life-death process. Would you mind reading it to us?
Not at all. It's very short.
Very short.
To be blessed in death, one must learn to live. And to be blessed in life, one must learn to die.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been an experience I've had with people coming to me with life-threatening illness especially.
Yeah.
I always have the sense that if they're so afraid of dying, they can't then invest in their life in the way that they need to actually optimise, either optimise the life they have or even change the direction of the life that they have. So to me, it's such an important thing to be able to explore death.
Yes.
Look at what that means for you. Look at the writing about death. Look at all the wonderful literature that's coming out, and all the classical literature, of course, too,
Yes.
and of course the biblical literature. And when you start to do that, I remember a professor said to me a long time ago, when I was talking about, he said, "What do you want to do?" And I said, "Look, I want to work with death and dying." And he said, He said, then you need to know your onions. He said, you need to read. You need to really steep yourself in the literature, in the understanding. Find your own space around that, so that you can stand in a very firm, conscious way with people as they experience this amazing transition.
Yeah. Where in there do you think our fixation with longevity plays the role? Like, it's too soon for me to die, I've got more things I need to do. Where does that come into it? Is that?
Well, I think that's body centered. It's like youth. It's like the youth culture. You know, if you've got wrinkles, then you've kind of passed your best. So you know, it's all of that. It's talking about people's physical selves, and really, that's not who we are. I mean, we are soul people. We're souls who inhabit a body. So we have a physical presence, in other words. So if we see it around the other way, then it makes a great deal of sense. And when people say, "Oh, children shouldn't die," I really struggle with that. I mean, it's hard. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but our soul journey, our soul path is a different path to our physical path. So it doesn't follow necessarily that, you know, you need to be 79.8 ready to die. You know, it doesn't work that way.
No.
And the more I read, the more I understand, the more I believe around this area, the more I see that the soul chooses their life. They choose the time to go. And it's hard to understand why a baby would die, come and go so quickly. But I don't think, I think that's when we come back to the mystical, that's when we come back to the sacred, that's when we come back to the spiritual journey. And I just see it differently. So people say, how do you stand to work with death and dying? And I think, well, hang on, That's life. To me, that's life. It's
Yes,
just,
that's right.
it's like death and life are intertwined.
Yes.
It's a natural part of living, and the only thing I would say is hard is when I see people die in pain or die unhappily or die with a lot of unresolved grief, and that's hard. That's hard to watch, and hard to watch for the people left behind. But I think we can do better than that. I think we can do much better than that.
So it comes back to what we talked about last week in relation to birthing was education. So you need to be talking about just what does death mean.
Yeah.
Now you're sort of skirting around something which you may or may not believe in, but do you believe in reincarnation? Is that something that sits behind? You do.
Norm, I do. I think the older I get, the more evident it is that we have met people before that we haven't met before in a physical form, but we've met this soul before, that we know them. We know them really very well, and we're very connected. I wonder about grandparenting, and I look at my grandchildren and sometimes have a strong sense that we have a deep connection, not just a DNA connection, but certainly we have a different connection, and the more you read about reincarnation, the more it's evident that souls incarnate together quite often, so that they do know each other, and I find that wonderful. It's to me that's a miraculous part of meeting people and understanding more.
Yeah, so you're obviously very alive to that component in people. Do you find that bleeds off into the environment at large, life at large? Do you find there's a capacity to embrace everything that lives in that?
Yes. The total consciousness of everything. Yes.
So
the trees and the creatures, and absolutely. And I have been given wonderful experiences, even with a pet. My own dog recently has just died, and I believe that she was a very strong presence, and have looked into that quite a bit, and felt that there was a soul presence in this creature that was there for nurturing.
Yes, and we'll nurture some time when we come back. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony in Diversity. We're speaking with Pamela Watson, a grief and loss counsellor. And Pamela, we were talking about the passing of your dog. Looking at that in the context of death, and dying, and living for that matter, as being on a broader palette. How do you feel about that, so that everything comes into the perspective?
Well, Norm, I experience and I believe strongly in the energetic world that we live in. So we are energetic beings. We belong. It's a total consciousness of energy. So many people will say to me, I go out into my garden. I say, yes, of course, because you are receiving energy. And I know for myself, there's times when I've needed to replenish, and to do that, I've used a walk. I've used a walk in a forest, or a walk in somewhere where I'm drawing energy, and especially drawing it from certain trees, and I'm aware that they and I are one and the same.
The flow.
It's.
Last week also we spoke about medical birthing and natural birthing in inverted commas, but about dying, there's a component of that too, isn't there? Of being perhaps comforted by, or even encouraged to die in the open, to die at least at home. Have you watched the power of that?
Oh, to die in surroundings that you choose must be the ultimate of awareness of your conscious connection to everything. So to die in your own home, to be able to look out outside and see your own garden,
Yes.
and to have your favourite pet beside you and your family around you, is, I can't think of anything better. I can't think of anything that to me is more, it's like completing the circle perfectly.
Yeah. If you dealt with people in both contexts, both dying inside a hospital, maybe without being able to avoid it, but dying in there and then dying in a place of their choice, have you been able to detect, or you've had it said to you by the patient themselves, that they feel much better at home?
Look, that's a very interesting question, and it's a tricky one, because not everyone feels confident to face their physical end at home. It's not always easy.
No.
And I think you also need to have a very supportive network to help that process go well.
Yeah.
If say you've got a partner that doesn't think that they can cope with that, then to go into a hospice or some such place where that's done as well as possible, and well, often very well, then that helps the whole scenario work better. But if you've got a family who really, like I had one woman say to me, I wanted to go home to hear my house. And it was the most beautiful thing. I really understood what she meant.
Yes, of course.
And she wanted to be in her own bed. She wanted to see her family around her. She wanted to be in her familiar space. And we facilitated that, I think, really, really well. The family were present. The family were coming and going. I was the constant, I suppose, in a way, that I was there all the time. But we really listened to what she wanted, and we provided that as best we could. Kept her comfortable, kept her safe, but yet she could let go of her life in a really dignified, beautiful way. And she did. And she did.
Sort of comes back to home birthing again, in the sense that there's a home birthing team, isn't there?
There is. So absolutely.
Is it sort of evolving into a home dying team, where obviously yourself
absolutely. And the community palliative care groups, of course, do this as well as they possibly can given the circumstances they don't live in, for instance. Like I tended to do that if it was asked for, but they pull together a great team, a team that supports the family, team that supports the person, and with medical help, and also with spiritual help and massage and music and all of the things, bringing it together to actually complement this person in a way that they have lived.
Yes, yes.
To complement their life, to really, to me it's like respecting the essence of them, that person in the very in that time.
You alluded before to the fact that you've actually taken a break from working because you had your own experience.
I did. Yes, I did. I'd decided to have a pilgrimage, a spiritual pilgrimage, and I had done that. And I went to the UK to several spots that I was particularly drawn to. I came home knowing, and I knew really for some years that things were changing in my life. I was starting to look around my environment and think, I don't want this anymore. This is not me. This is not what I want to do anymore. And after that experience of coming back from overseas, I thought, yes, change is afoot. There's going to be something. Didn't quite anticipate the sort of change that I got. But it certainly pushed me into a change that was needed. And I had to make a decision. Do I go with the medical model and the way that they would recommend, or and it was very clear that my spiritual dimension came to the fore, or my innate knowledge, my innate intuition came to the fore to say, actually, this is not what it's about. It's not really about.
Tell you what it is about, though. It's about time. We're out of it. We'll be back in a moment. Welcome back. You're watching Harmony and Diversity, and we're speaking with Pamela Watson, a grief and loss counsellor. We're addressing this sort of life-threatening encounter that you had, Pamela. That was not just life-threatening, but life-changing. Can you tell us a little bit about how that unwound?
I think it was coming from a medical model and really working in an area where I was working with people with similar conditions. I was faced with an inner knowing that to walk that medical path was not for me, for whatever reason.
Yes.
It became I became increasingly aware that it was about change. So it was about changing my life, changing my path, changing my direction. And when I look back at it now, I realise I needed a serious jolt to do that. I probably wouldn't have done that without something that really called me to look very closely at what I was doing. So, and as I think we've talked about, I didn't necessarily know whether the decision was a decision to go on living and to change that way, or whether it was not to go on living. I didn't know that. That was part of the deal, really, for me. I understood that. It wasn't always well accepted by my family and friends, I can tell you.
No,
they were quite concerned about that. But that was my decision, and it was a very one of those internal peaceful decisions.
Yeah.
Hard. I'm not saying it was easy, but I'm saying it was peaceful. I believed in what I was doing. And I concerned the medical people around me a great deal, as you can imagine.
Yes.
I decided to leave work, so I left my work. I actually downsized, packed up my house and gave quite a lot of things away, and decided, and a good friend took me into her nurturing space, and I spent several years working very much around the spiritual and looking at the way that our bodies can heal themselves, and that we can actually, and I've always known it. I've always believed in it.
Yeah.
I believe it, and I really was now given the experience to have my own experience of that. Was I frightened? Yes, Norm, I was frightened at times, but it was a very important experience for me.
Yes, I can see that. So there was what were the sort of processes, spiritual processes? You'd been to Findhorn and Glastonbury. That's where you came back from. Is
I
that
did.
right?
Yes, that's right.
Did that seed you with some of the power that you engaged with in this whole decision-making and healing process?
Well, it did. It did in lots of interesting ways, because I felt very held in that whole journey, in that pilgrimage. I was very held. People would say to me, "Aren't you afraid to go on your own?" No, it didn't even occur to me.
No.
I was held in the whole process. In Findhorn, I was introduced to an Australian writer who was also a spiritual, enlightened man who lives here in Australia. And his work brought me to a place that I got a great deal of understanding about the process of my body and the process of how unconditional love, how the divine love can actually heal.
Yes.
So I was brought into all of these. I mean, and you talk about stretching. Stretched, yes, I was stretched. You know, I felt like there was someone inside pushing. You know, so that I was sort of having to encompass lots of new thought and encompass new ideas and work on huge levels of trust.
Yes.
And it was an amazing time. I spent a lot of time working on my energetic self. I spent a lot of time with a spiritual director,
Yes.
working on my intuitive self, my spiritual dimension altogether.
Yeah, and the outcome was something that you alluded to the fact that there was a medical person who wasn't prepared to use the word miracle, but it sort of,
No.
it was sort of along those lines, though,
Yes,
wasn't
it was. I've after I was tested again, I was tested to be totally clear of anything at all, and that was. Look, I mean, I always, you know, sort of qualify that by saying it's not. It's not an experience that everyone can have, wants to have, will have. I don't know, whatever you want to say, but it was my experience.
It was your experience,
and I was very blown away actually by the experience, and very grateful, and still coming to terms, I think, to a large degree with, hang on, what does this mean for me, and where do I go from here? Really, it's a very interesting experience.
So your evolving awareness of the soul and the spiritual being having a physical experience, that's been reinforced by this.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. It's very much now living my life the other way around, living from the inside. So inside to outside.
Inside to outside.
I'm not saying there's no wobbles. There are definite wobbles, but
Yes,
but I'm saying that it's a different perspective on life altogether.
Yeah. If there were no wobbles, you'd be worried.
Maybe I wouldn't be human. That's right. Would be the alien everyone thinks I am. That's right. That's right.
That's right.
Indeed.
So this is sort of bringing the whole thing together of your experience in the birth thing and your experience with the dying, your own interface with this. It's quite amazing and very rich. What would just one, because we're nearly out of time, but what would be just one line which you think would be your favourite observation in relation to the life that you've led to this point in this surviving?
I think I've been given a wonderful lesson on conscious living.
Conscious living.
Conscious living and conscious dying. And that's the work I'd like to follow.
Conscious living and conscious dying.
And the education that goes with that, and the support for that. Yes.
Thank you, Pamela. Thanks very much for making yourself available. It's been a fascinating interview, and perhaps we can speak again sometime.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've been watching Harmony and Diversity. We'll be back next week. Thanks for watching, and bye for now.
Baha'u'llah, Shanti Om.